Wrestling has had its fair share of spooky characters, spooky or scary. And I feel like with this edition of PJR, we're looking at some kind of spooky, kind of scary wrestling groups. And this week, we are looking at the original three from the Wyatt family, being Bray Wyatt, Luke Harper, and Eric Rowan. The Brood, being Gangrel, Edge, and Christian. And Sanity, being Alexander Wolf, Eric Young, and Killian Dane. Now, Juice, you brought this one to the table because you are so good at picking PJRs. I got to admit, a lot of good ones on the board here as we're looking at them all right now. And this is an interesting one. I like the theme of, like I said, like I kind of introduced us with the spooky, scary kind of characters and groups. And I like how we have like a little bit of like Attitude Era, newer era, and then just one we saw mostly in NXT.
Yeah, I wanted to mix up. I was thinking spooky teams in different eras, and kind of first I thought Sanity might be out of place, but I was just having trouble thinking of another faction that I think was worthy of going with Wyatt family and the Brood. I thought about like Ministry of Darkness, but that was too many people. There were a few other I thought of, like Judgment Day, but I kind of saved them for another PGR because they're like a 4-member thing. And I didn't want a faction that was associated with Edge since we already have the Brood. Yeah, so I went with these three. Three I really all like. Three of my favorite factions all time. Not just I like spooky stuff. I like mystical characters. I know a lot of people don't, but you know, I like the storytelling and the character work and the goofiness and the the fantasy side of wrestling just as much as I love the technical classic bangers. So I'll jump into my PGR for this. This is my push. Deciding who the push was pretty tough for me. I'm going with the Wyatt family. It's the original Wyatt family. I just think Bray Wyatt is a generational talent. People compare him to Undertaker, but he is in the mystical sense, but I think he also just brings something that even Undertaker never brought. And his creativity is second to none. His leadership of this faction was awesome. Harper is, I think, one of the most underrated big men WWE has ever seen, and a guy I wish didn't pass away so tragically because he had so much more to give because he was really hitting his stride, and I think probably would have been a world champ or at least seen more in world title matches because he was on a roll, man. He was one of my favorite things in AEW. I'm not just saying that. I mean it because he just brought great energy to him and a unique side of him that I never saw before. And then Rowan's he's an intimidating guy. I know he's not everyone's cup of tea, but I actually kind of like him. I think I'm the only person who liked the spider thing just because I find it funny.
You are indeed the only person that liked the spider thing.
But the reason I like it because it was so bad. It's like I like really bad sci-fi movies, the ones that are so bad on purpose but they're funny. And that was my reaction to the spider thing. I was like, I love that they're just trolling the fans, and fans like, it's a waste of screen time. People, blah blah blah. I'm like, oh no, I had fun. It was fucking goofy as shit. And I think Rowan has a cool sense of humor, and I think he's a decent guy in the ring too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so pushing them for sure. They've done so many great things. They did plenty of bad things, but that's never on them. It's always on the booking. But what can you do about that? But I would book them however Bray Wyatt tells me to book them. I would always listen to what he has to say. Even though I heard that he gets a little convoluted at times, so definitely I'd have to keep the reins on him at times. But definitely always a guy that would be in my ear, and I'd try to go in the direction that he wants for his family.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, though. I also am going to be putting the OG3 Wyatt family in my push, mainly because, like you said, I love Bray Wyatt. Bray Wyatt is probably my favorite wrestler in the last like 5 years, I'd say. I loved The Fiend as much as people probably didn't like it. But the thing about I loved cult leader Bray too. That was a man I thought could feasibly beat John Cena. I thought that was a man that could feasibly beat The Undertaker, beat Kane, which technically he did. And I loved the Wyatt family's incarnation. I think the tag team of Rowan and Harper were badass. I think that they were badass as the Bludgeon Brothers. I think they were badass as the Wyatt family members. I'll never forget watching the Money in the Bank 2014, where they kicked off the show against the Usos in a championship match, and it was a banger. Like they brought it to the ring. My dad, who's somebody that hasn't watched wrestling since like the late 90s, was like, wow, these guys are kicking ass. And you mentioned it. Like Harper was so underrated. Biggest, in my opinion, probably the most underrated big man. Test is probably up there too from WWE history, but he just has charisma. Mr. Brody Lee just really showed us there was so much more. And like you said, it's just honestly tragic. It does still make me sad as a wrestling fan to this day that they came so unexpectedly and so suddenly. And yeah, I know we recently came up on a major anniversary too. And, I just hope that wherever Brody Lee's spirit is right now, it is resting comfortably and going, yeah. Because also Harper was fucking psychotic and I loved that too. But you mentioned it with Rowan too, though. He was a great muscle. He was an absolutely great wrestling muscle in terms of being in the Wyatt family and working with Daniel Bryan. He really could bring it. Like I never thought once the Wyatt family broke up that he was that bad, like in terms of in ring. They just didn't really present him well, and he just looked like he was still part of the Wyatt family. If they gave him that, like when he came, like how he came out with Daniel Bryan, even when he came out with the spider gimmick, like the metal t-shirts and just like normal looking pants, and he just looked, and he has just his big intimidating lumbering body and his big giant ass red beard and chrome dome. Like they could make him look intimidating and feasibly pass him off as, okay, this is a monster. This is a guy that you have to fight and you're not happy you got to fight him tonight. So yeah, Wyatt family sitting comfortably in my push position.
Yeah, we agree easy in there. I think that was pretty it was easy for you, almost easy for me because I almost had my job as my push. And that's the Brood. Edge is one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. I think the reason I moved them down is because they're very short-lived and they got like absorbed in the Ministry of Darkness really quickly, which I think was a huge mistake because they were really over. One of my favorite themes. I love it. Like it's probably like a Mount Rushmore of wordless themes for me, with no words, or close to it.
I was gonna say, do you count like the breathing noises and like the weird whispering as words?
I don't. Like the friggin' chance. I love it. I love it. I love spookiness. I love that their gimmick was that they're vampires. I like vampires. I don't like Twilight vampires, but I like wrestling vampires. Give me that. I kind of wish they did more with them and kind of made them easier to identify as vampires. Like it's just their shirts, but they're cool. I like Gangrel. I like him in TNA appearances. I like he still wrestles on the indies, man. He's still kicking it. And then Edge and Christian, my favorite tag team of all time, and this is where they got their start. And there's creative guys, and I would have loved to see where this faction went, and definitely they would have a longer shelf life with me. Yes, there would be expiration date, probably like 2 to 3 years, like around like 3 years, because Edge and Christian are both guys that need to be alone at some point, or at least tag team on their own without Gangrel, and then alone because they're main event studs. I'm releasing Sanity, which was easy to pick them as my release, but they are very talented, and mainly it's because of Eric Young. He's probably my third favorite of the 9 people in these factions. I love Eric Young. Can't wait to see what he does next now that he got murdered from Impact. But I think, and I'm my leading man, if I'm picking who's my he's my second favorite leading man. Bray Wyatt's obviously my favorite leading man of these three factions, but he's Eric Young's right after him. I had nothing against Dane or Wolf, but I think the two of them are the main reason that Sanity's in my release spot.
No, and I think that's fair because I completely agree with you. This is another PJR where we have the same exact one. In terms of history, the Brood has had 3 members, all of which could be made arguments for having Hall of Fame careers. I mean, Edge and Christian definitely, without a doubt in my mind, they're Hall of Famers. Edge already in a Hall of Famer. But is Christian a Hall of Famer too, actually? Did he get inducted in the recent years? Okay. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. In terms of history looks fondly back on the Brood. Like you said, great entrance, great theme, and great wrestlers that have come out of it. And I agree with you too. I feel like in my company, they would have a very similar run to how the Brood did, maybe a little bit more success in terms of like high profile stories. Of course, they're in my job position, so they're never going to be like major focal points of my show, but they're good mid-card fodder, like they would be good putting on bangers. People would be like, who is this Edge guy? Who is this Christian guy? And then, have Edge and Christian maybe break off, turn on the Brood, maybe have, maybe Matt and Jeff Hardy become part of the Brood, maybe history just repeats itself, and then they go on and be single stars like they are. But when it comes to Sanity, yeah, they just don't have that historical resume, I guess, as much as the Brood and the Wyatt family do in terms of star power and how well everyone really did within the group. And once they got to the main roster in WWE, they also really fell apart. And again, that's probably mostly on booking because I liked Killian Dane. He was one of my favorite NXT big men. I liked Damo. I love Big Damo. I think that he, as somebody that's a larger bearded fat man that's pretty hairy, I relate to him pretty heavily. So that was always really great to see somebody like him on TV. And, I liked Alexander Wolf. He wasn't that bad. But like you said, Eric Young definitely was the focal point and the star of the group. And in my opinion, if it came down to, having releases and stuff like that, he would probably, out of the 3 from Sanity, be the only one that might make my roster. And he might be coming back to WWE now. We don't know. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, unfortunately, I'm going to be putting Sanity as my release. But if they stayed at Sanity and went to somewhere like an Impact or even an AEW, I feel like they would do well. If booked right.
Yeah, definitely. And considering how successful Violence is Forever did in Impact, which I know the only person the same is Eric Young, but it was really a very similar faction. And Eric Young's just a genius too. He's almost as smart as Bray Wyatt is when it comes to leading a faction and doing really creative, imaginative stuff and storylines.
Well, if you guys agree with this PJR we presented tonight, you can let us know in the comments below, or you can let us know on social media, which are linked in the description, but just tell the people where they can find us.
Yeah, you go to Twitter, you type capital T, capital O, capital T, capital C, underscore capital P, lowercase o, lowercase d, Instagram T O T C underscore P O D.
Yes, and again, thank you all so much for tuning in, making sure you are liking, rating, and subscribing to our channel. And of course, thank you all so much for tuning in, and we will catch you next time.